Olivia Carter stared at her reflection in the O'Hare International Airport bathroom mirror, attempting to tame her unruly dark curls for the third time. The harsh fluorescent lights accentuated the dark circles under her blue eyes, evidence of 3 weeks of double shifts at Rose's diner. Her hands trembled slightly as she splashed cold water on her face, trying to wake herself up. She couldn't afford to miss this flight. Not when her grandmother, Beatrice, needed her in Milan. The memory of her Aunt Vivian's phone call from 2 days ago still made her stomach twist. "Olivia, your grandmother's condition has deteriorated," Vivian had said, her normally composed voice breaking. "The doctors, they say we should prepare ourselves. I got you a ticket, you need to come now." The ticket was a miracle Olivia could never have afforded on her own. Not with an 8-year-old daughter and barely scraping by on a waitress's salary. That morning's goodbye with Sophie had nearly shattered her. Her daughter had clung to her at the front door, tiny fingers grasping Olivia's worn denim jacket. "Mommy, why can't I come with you?" Sophie had asked, her big brown eyes shimmering with tears. "Promise you'll call me every day." Olivia had crouched down, wrapping her daughter in a tight hug, inhaling the familiar scent of strawberry shampoo. "Every single day, sweetheart. Promise. And I'll bring you back something special from Milan." She had tried to sound enthusiastic, turning the trip into an adventure rather than the heartbreaking reality of possibly saying goodbye to a grandmother Sophie barely remembered. Nathan, her ex-husband, had stood in the doorway, arms crossed over his chest, his jaw clenched. Their divorce 2 years ago had left deep wounds, but he was still Sophie's father, and right now, he was her only option for childcare. "I'll take good care of her," he had said stiffly, as if reading her thoughts. "Just keep in touch." The tension between them was thick, the same tension that had eventually led to the end of their marriage. Final boarding call for flight AZ-179 to Milan Malpensa Airport. The announcement jolted Olivia back to reality. She grabbed her well-worn leather bag and rushed through the terminal, her sensible black flats tapping loudly against the polished floor. Her heart pounded as she weaved through the bustling crowd, murmuring apologies whenever she accidentally bumped into fellow travelers. She reached the gate just as the flight attendant was preparing to close the door. "Wait, please," she called out, waving her boarding pass. The attendant's initial frown softened at Olivia's obvious distress, and she quickly scanned the ticket. "Hurry along, dear. You're in 22C. Olivia practically stumbled down the jet bridge, struggling to catch her breath. Inside the plane, she maneuvered through the narrow aisle, murmuring apologies as her bag accidentally brushed against seated passengers. When she reached row 22, she came to an abrupt stop. A man in an impeccably tailored charcoal gray suit occupied the window seat, his attention focused on a sleek, leather-bound book. Even seated, she could tell he was tall, with broad shoulders and dark brown hair peppered with distinguished silver at the temples. As she struggled to lift her bag into the overhead compartment, her arms shaking from exhaustion, the man glanced up. The book in his hands was a well-worn copy of The Picture of Dorian Gray, a novel she had once taught her 8th-grade students during her brief teaching career before Sophie was born. "Please, allow me," he said, rising in one effortless motion. His voice carried a refined British accent, and his deep green eyes met hers with an unexpected warmth. Without hesitation, he lifted her bag with ease, their fingers brushing momentarily. The light contact sent a jolt of awareness through Olivia's weary body. "Thank you," she managed, sliding into her seat. She suddenly felt self-conscious about her simple jeans and faded sweater beside his obvious refinement. "I'm not usually this," she gestured vaguely, unsure how to explain that she was usually more put together, even if that hadn't been true for quite some time. "Alexander Hayes," he introduced himself with a slight smile that softened his otherwise serious features. "And no explanation needed." "Long day?" "Long month," Olivia admitted, attempting to return his smile as she tried to settle into the cramped economy seat. She hadn't been on a plane since her honeymoon 7 years ago, and she had forgotten how claustrophobic it felt. The flight attendants began their safety demonstration, their polished movements barely registering in Olivia's exhaustion-clouded mind. As the plane taxied and took off, she tried to focus on the shimmering city lights below, but her eyelids grew heavier with every passing second. The past few weeks, working overtime, arranging Sophie's care, and worrying about her grandmother had finally taken their toll. She fought to stay awake, not wanting to seem rude to her seatmate who had been nothing but courteous. "It's a long flight," Alexander said softly, noticing her struggle. Get some rest. I promise I won't be offended. His voice had the rich, steady warmth of an audiobook narrator, the kind Olivia sometimes played for Sophie at bedtime. She meant to thank him, but the words never left her lips. The steady hum of the engines, the dimmed cabin, and the warmth of the enclosed space all conspired against her remaining consciousness. Her head tilted to the side, coming to rest on something firm yet unexpectedly comfortable, Alexander's shoulder. In her last hazy moments of awareness, she thought she should move, apologize. But exhaustion won. She didn't feel the slight shift as Alexander adjusted his position to make her more comfortable. She didn't notice the way he carefully draped his suit jacket over her when the cabin turned chilly. She didn't see him quietly signal to the flight attendant to hold off on dinner service, ensuring her sleep wouldn't be disturbed. And she certainly had no idea that Alexander Hayes, CEO of Hayes Global Investments and one of London's most influential businessmen, had just cancelled his dinner meeting in Milan with a quick email. For the first time in years, his meticulous schedule no longer seemed as important as making sure the exhausted woman beside him got the rest she so clearly needed. As the plane cruised over the Atlantic, neither of them could have predicted how the small moment of unguarded vulnerability would shift the course of their lives. Olivia didn't know that her grandmother's illness would bring her not only to Milan but also to an unexpected chance at something she had long since stopped believing in. And she certainly couldn't have foreseen that back in Chicago, Nathan, her ex-husband, would soon present an obstacle, one that would challenge whatever had begun to spark between her and the kind stranger who had let her sleep on his shoulder at 36,000 feet. Olivia woke with a jolt as the plane hit a patch of turbulence. For a brief moment, she felt disoriented, her mind thick with sleep. Then, with growing horror, she realized she had been using Alexander Hayes' shoulder as a pillow. She sat upright abruptly, her cheeks burning with embarrassment. His expensive suit jacket slipped from her shoulders and she caught it reflexively. I'm so sorry, she stammered, mortified. I didn't mean to. She stopped when Alexander turned to her with an easy, reassuring smile, the kind that made her pulse stutter. You needed the rest, he said simply, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. We're about halfway to Milan now. Would you like some water? Before she could respond, he pressed the call button. Olivia glanced around and realized that most passengers were either asleep or quietly watching their in-flight entertainment. A quick look at her watch confirmed she had been asleep for nearly 4 hours. I can't believe I slept that long, she murmured, running a hand through her hair self-consciously. The flight attendant appeared moments later, offering 2 bottles of water. She greeted Alexander by name, her tone friendly, familiar. Olivia couldn't help but notice. As the flight attendant handed them their drinks, she shot Olivia a knowing look and smiled before walking away, making Olivia's blush deepen. You seem to fly this route often, Olivia remarked, taking a grateful sip. Her throat was parched and she suddenly realized she had missed dinner service. Alexander nodded, shifting slightly to face her better. London to Chicago and back. More times than I can count. Though usually, I'm in. He hesitated before choosing his words carefully. A different section of the plane. Olivia's eyes widened as the realization clicked. Of course, the designer suit. The way the flight attendant knew his name. His entire demeanor. Why aren't you there now? She asked before she could stop herself. A hint of a smirk touched his lips. Last-minute booking. This was the only seat available. What he didn't mention was that he had been offered an upgrade but had unexpectedly turned it down. Their conversation began to flow effortlessly. Alexander told her about growing up in London's Kensington neighborhood, his years at Oxford, and his career in international finance. Though he modestly described himself as a business consultant, Olivia suspected there was much more to the story. She found herself opening up, too, about Sophie, about her teaching career before the divorce, and about how she had ended up waiting tables. Sophie sounds wonderful, Alexander said warmly when Olivia showed him a photo of her daughter's latest art project on her phone. She has your smile. Olivia felt a pang of guilt. She wanted to come with me, but with school and everything. She trailed off, remembering Sophie's tearful goodbye. It's the first time I've been away from her for more than a day since the divorce. That must be difficult, Alexander said quietly. His fingers twitched slightly on the armrest between them as if debating whether to offer comfort. How long will you be in Milan? I don't know, Olivia admitted, her voice catching. My grandmother, she's not well. The doctors say it could be weeks or a. She couldn't finish the sentence. To her horror, her eyes filled with tears. Without hesitation, Alexander reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a crisp white handkerchief, handing it to her. The old-fashioned gesture caught Olivia off guard, making her laugh despite the tears. "Who even carries these anymore?" she asked, dabbing at her eyes. "My mother would be horrified if I didn't," he replied with a boyish grin. "She has very specific ideas about what a gentleman should always have on hand." Olivia tried to return the handkerchief, but he shook his head. "Keep it," he said. "Consider it a souvenir from the time you used a complete stranger as a pillow." His teasing tone made her smile again, and she felt something shift inside her. For the first time since her divorce, she felt genuinely at ease with the man. Despite his wealth and polished demeanor, or perhaps because of it, Alexander exuded a quiet confidence. He didn't need to prove anything, and that somehow made Olivia feel comfortable around him. As they talked, the cabin lights gradually brightened and the scent of fresh coffee filled the air. Flight attendants began preparing for breakfast service. "I could seriously use a coffee," Olivia said, stretching her stiff shoulders. As if on cue, her stomach let out a low grumble. Alexander chuckled, pressing the call button once again. When the flight attendant appeared, he murmured something to her that Olivia couldn't hear. Minutes later, she returned with 2 full breakfast trays. But these weren't the usual economy-class meals. These were clearly from first class, complete with flaky croissants, fresh fruit, and steaming coffee in porcelain cups. Olivia's eyes widened. "You really shouldn't have," she protested, even as her mouth watered at the sight. "I can't let you," she started, but Alexander interrupted smoothly. "Consider it payment for being such an excellent pillow." His smirk made her laugh, and as they shared breakfast, watching the first golden rays of sunrise spill across the horizon, Olivia felt an unfamiliar flicker of anticipation in her chest. She found herself hoping, just maybe, that this connection wouldn't end when they landed in Milan. What she didn't know was that Alexander was already formulating a plan to ensure that it wouldn't. In his jacket pocket, his phone buzzed with ignored meeting notifications. For the first time in his perfectly structured life, Alexander Hayes was letting fate and a chance encounter with an exhausted stranger take the lead. The plane touched down at Milan Malpensa Airport under a gray, overcast sky. As passengers began gathering their belongings, Alexander effortlessly retrieved Olivia's bag from the overhead compartment. "Let me give you my card," he said, reaching into his suit jacket. "Perhaps we could have coffee while you're in Milan." Olivia's heart fluttered as she took the business card from his hand. Her eyes widened slightly as she read his title. "Alexander Hayes, CEO. Hayes Global Investments." She looked up at him, a new understanding settling in. "You're not just in business consulting, are you?" Alexander exhaled softly, a touch of embarrassment in his expression. "I may have downplayed my position. I didn't want it to change anything." Before Olivia could respond, her phone buzzed with an urgent message from Aunt Vivian. "Where are you? Your grandmother's condition has worsened. Come straight to San Rafael Hospital." Her fingers tightened around the phone, her stomach nodding. "Is everything all right?" Alexander asked, noticing the sudden tension in her posture. "My grandmother. I need to get to the hospital right away," Olivia managed, her voice shaking. Without hesitation, Alexander took control. "My driver is waiting outside. Let me take you there." She hesitated, torn between practicality and pride. "Please," he added gently. "It's the least I can do." Minutes later, Olivia found herself in the back of a sleek black Maserati, speeding through the rain-slicked streets of Milan. Normally, she would have marveled at the city. The historic architecture, the cobblestone roads, the grand piazzas. But her mind was consumed with worry for Beatrice. Alexander sat beside her in silent support, his presence steady, reassuring. Occasionally, when she seemed particularly anxious, his hand would lightly graze hers on the seat, an unspoken offer of comfort. At the hospital, Alexander refused to simply drop her off. "I'll wait here," he told her as she rushed toward the entrance. Inside, Olivia found Aunt Vivian pacing in the hallway, her face tight with worry. "Olivia, thank God you're here," Vivian whispered, pulling her into a tight hug. Then her gaze shifted over Olivia's shoulder to Alexander, who had followed her inside. "And who's this?" she asked, a curious glint in her eyes. "This is Alexander," Olivia explained quickly. "We met on the plane. He helped me get here faster." Vivian's expression softened in gratitude. "Your grandmother has been asking for you," she said gently. Then, glancing at Alexander, she added, "We should talk privately." Alexander immediately understood. "I'll leave you with your family," he said softly. "But Olivia, if you need anything at all, call me." His sincerity sent a warmth through her chest. She watched as he turned and walked back toward the waiting area. The next few hours were a blur of hushed conversations, beeping monitors, and the rhythmic sounds of medical equipment. Beatrice drifted in and out of consciousness, her frail hand squeezing Olivia's. During one lucid moment, she smiled weakly. "My little star, you came." The childhood nickname cracked something deep inside Olivia, and she fought back tears. Late that evening, while Vivian went to get coffee, Olivia stepped out into the corridor and checked her phone. Several missed calls from Nathan. Dread pooled in her stomach as she hit redial. The moment he picked up, his voice was sharp, accusing. "Where the hell have you been? And who is this guy you're running around Milan with?" Olivia blinked, confused. "What are you talking about?" "Don't play dumb, Olivia. Sophie's teacher saw you on Instagram. Some CEO posted a photo with you asleep on his shoulder. It's everywhere. What kind of example is that for our daughter?" Her blood turned to ice. She quickly opened Instagram, her heart hammering. There it was, a candid photo she hadn't even known was taken. She was curled up against Alexander, his jacket draped over her, the two of them bathed in the soft glow of sunrise through the airplane window. The caption read, "Sometimes the best meetings happen by chance." Milan sunrise. Thousands of likes. Hundreds of comments. Some were lighthearted, teasing about a mystery woman in economy class. Others were cruel. Gold digger. Opportunist. Desperate. Her hands trembled as she scrolled through the articles popping up on tabloid sites. London's most eligible bachelor finds love at 36,000 feet? Nathan's voice snapped her back to reality. "I'm talking to my lawyer. This kind of media attention is bad for Sophie. Maybe it's time to revisit custody." Her breath hitched. "Nathan, you can't do that," she exclaimed, her voice rising. "It was just a chance encounter. I'm here for Beatrice, you know that." "Tell that to the judge," he shot back before hanging up. Olivia stood frozen, her legs weak beneath her. How had everything spiraled out of control so fast? She opened her messages, intending to ask Alexander to take down the post, but stopped when she saw his name already at the top of her notifications. "Olivia, I'm so sorry. My PR team posted that photo without my knowledge. I've had it taken down, but the damage is done. Please let me explain. Can we meet? I never meant for this to happen." Before she could respond, Vivian appeared in the hallway, her face pale. "Olivia, come quick." Olivia rushed back into the hospital room, her heart pounding. Doctors surrounded Beatrice's bed, machines beeping urgently. Time seemed to stretch, her world narrowing to the frantic movement of medical staff and the silent prayer in her head. "Please, not yet. Not like this." Standing in that sterile room, watching her grandmother fight for life, Olivia felt like everything was slipping away. Her chance at happiness, maybe even custody of Sophie. How had a simple nap on a plane turned her life upside down in less than 24 hours? The doctors moved swiftly, their conversation in rapid Italian blending into white noise. After what felt like an eternity, the lead physician turned toward them. "She's stable," he said in accented English. "The new medication is working. She's stronger than we thought." Olivia's knees nearly buckled as relief surged through her. Vivian grabbed her hand, both of them crying tears of gratitude. When they were finally allowed back into the room, Beatrice was awake, her eyes sharper, more focused. She squeezed Olivia's hand. "You brought me luck, my little star," she whispered. "But why do you look so troubled? This old woman isn't going anywhere just yet." Olivia let out a shaky laugh, but the weight of everything crashed over her at once. She told her grandmother everything, the photo, Nathan's threats, the media explosion. Beatrice listened with the calm wisdom of someone who had seen life's storms rise and fall. "Your Nathan," she said firmly, "is acting out of fear. He sees you moving forward and it scares him." She took a slow breath, gathering her strength. "And this Alexander of yours, where's he now?" Olivia hesitated. "I don't know. Everything happened so fast." A soft knock at the door interrupted them. Alexander stood in the doorway, still in his suit from the flight, though his tie was now slightly loosened. His hair looked tousled, as if he had been running his hands through it. In his arms was a bouquet of fresh white lilies. "I hope I'm not intruding," he said softly. "The nurses finally told me she was doing better." His gaze found Olivia's, something unspoken passing between them. "I couldn't leave without making things right." Beatrice's sharp eyes flicked between them, a knowing smile tugging at her lips. "Vivian," she said suddenly, "I think we need coffee. A lot of coffee." Vivian, hiding a smirk, helped Beatrice sit up before following her cue, leaving Olivia and Alexander alone. Olivia exhaled slowly. Alexander placed the bouquet on the bedside table before turning to her. I'm so sorry, Olivia, he said sincerely. My PR team posted that photo without my knowledge. They're used to managing my image, but this crossed a line. I fired the person responsible. It's not just about the photo, Olivia whispered, her voice breaking. Nathan is threatening to take Sophie from me. I've worked so hard to be the best mother I can to never give him a reason to do this. And now? Stop, Alexander said gently, stepping closer. I've already handled it. She blinked in confusion. What? My legal team reached out to Nathan's lawyer an hour ago, he explained. They made it clear that if he pursues any custody changes based on this, he'll be hit with a defamation lawsuit. They also reminded him that using social media gossip to try and separate a mother from her child wouldn't exactly look great in court. Olivia stared at him. You did that for me? I'd do much more than that, Alexander admitted softly. I know we've only known each other for a day, but sometimes a day is all it takes to know something is different. He reached out, his thumb brushing away a tear from her cheek. I'm not asking for anything except a chance to see where this goes. At your pace. On your terms. Olivia swallowed hard. But your world is so different from mine, she murmured. I'm just a waitress from Chicago. Alexander smiled, shaking his head. You're a devoted mother, a loyal granddaughter, and the kind of person who apologizes for falling asleep on a stranger's shoulder, he said. That's who you are. The rest is just details. From the bed, Beatrice's amused voice rang out. Olivia, if you don't say yes to that man, I'm getting out of this bed and knocking some sense into you. They both turned, startled, before bursting into laughter. Your grandmother has excellent hearing, Alexander noted. And excellent taste, Beatrice added, making them laugh again. Olivia looked at Alexander, really looked at him. Beyond the wealth and polished exterior, she saw the same man who had draped his jacket over her on the plane. The man who had waited for hours in a hospital just to make things right. Okay, she said softly. Yes. Alexander's smile was slow, genuine. Yes to what? Yes to seeing where this goes. Yes to coffee in Milan. Yes to taking a chance. Without hesitation, he pulled her close, and right there, in her grandmother's hospital room, with the soft beeping of medical machines in the background, they shared their first kiss. It was gentle, warm, and filled with quiet promise. About time, Beatrice called out. They turned to find her and Vivian watching them with matching grins. Now, Alexander, Beatrice continued, tell me about your family. And Olivia, call Sophie. That poor child must be wondering if her mother got lost in Italy. The next hour passed in a blur of FaceTime calls with Sophie, who was absolutely delighted to meet a real-life prince, comfortable conversation, and more espresso than anyone should reasonably consume. Nathan, in a rare moment of humility, sent a short message apologizing for his overreaction and assuring Olivia that Sophie was fine and that custody wouldn't be an issue. That evening, as Alexander drove Olivia to Aunt Vivian's home, they passed the Duomo, its Gothic spires illuminated against the night sky. I've always wanted to see Milan, Olivia admitted, gazing out the window. But I never imagined it quite like this. Life rarely turns out the way we expect, Alexander mused, reaching over to take her hand. Sometimes it's better. Olivia glanced down at their intertwined fingers, a soft smile forming on her lips. Who would have thought that a delayed flight, an exhausted single mother, and an accidental nap would lead to this? Her grandmother was recovering. Sophie was safe. And somehow, in the midst of the chaos, she had found something she wasn't even looking for. Better indeed, she whispered, squeezing his hand as they drove through the streets of Milan. Their story was just beginning.